everyone. Welcome to Second First Conversations, a presentation of Second Congregational First Presbyterian Church in downtown Rockford, Illinois, where we serve downtown Rockford and beyond with God's grace. I'm your host, Phil Davidson, along with Greg McCulloch. On this episode of Second First Conversations, we will be taking a closer look at the Bells program. It's actually Bells programs at Second First. Our guests today are Valerie Blair, Second First Director of Music, including the Martin Ringers, Joyce Zartman, Director of the Carillons, and Sarah Hallberg, Director of the Peanut Bells. Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
So, Valerie, you have 3 bell programs. That's really impressive, but why 3 bell programs?
Well, we have the program from Second Congregational Church, and we have a program from First Presbyterian Church, and then we have a children's program. And those are the 3 bell programs that we have currently going on at the church. That's a result of the federation of Second Congregational, United Church of Christ, and First Presbyterian Church.
When we talk about the federation, if any of you listening don't know what we're talking about, you need to go back to our YouTube channel and you need to look up podcast number 1, which tells you all about that whole federation thingy.
So how many handbells and hand chimes do we have at Second First to support all these programs?
A whole lot of bells. We have Martin Ringers has 170 bells in total, which includes 14 rack bells. We've got some base bells that are made on a custom-designed, custom-made bell rack because they're too heavy to hold. 18 peanut bells, which are the little baby bells, teeny tiny bells, and 138 bells that are on the table. So out of that 170, it's 14 on the rack, 18 of the small, teeny tiny ones, and 138 table bells. And the Martin Ringers have 12 positions, 12 people playing the different positions at one time.
Wow. That is a lot of bells.
That's just for the Martin Ringers. Then we have the Carillons, which I'll let Joyce address, and the Peanut Bells.
The Carillons came from First Press with 49 Whitechapel bells, and we also have a combination of hand chimes and handbells, which belong to both churches. We have 5 octaves of hand chimes for the adult choirs, which is a total of 61 hand chimes.
Wow.
Peanut Ringers have Malmark hand chimes, and we've got 37 chimes. And those range from a C4, which is a pretty low bell, up to a C7, which is our highest bell, or chime, I should say.
So I'm going to direct this to Joyce. So you mentioned handbells and hand chimes. What's the difference?
Our handbell is a metal casting with a leather handle or a plastic handle. They sound a little different. This is the way a handbell sounds. And a hand chime is a metal tube with a clapper, and this is the way a hand chime sounds.
Whoa.
Wow, that came through.
That woke me up.
I actually rang a different octave for the bell than I did for the chime. That was another reason it sounded so different.
Well, now, tell us something about the type or brand of bells that we use. I think you already mentioned one brand. And how are they different from other brands?
Well, Whitechapel bells were their first handbells made. They started making them in England in the late 1500s. American companies started making their bells in the 1900s. American bells are slightly different. The casting is lighter. It's a different composition of tin and
Copper.
And copper. Their castings are a little thinner. They sound a little different. So this is a Malmark American bell. And this is a Whitechapel bell. The Whitechapel bell sounds a little sweeter, in my opinion, and the Malmark sounds a little brighter. This is Malmark, and this is Whitechapel. And this is a chime in a different octave.
Ding-a-ling.
Yeah. The ears are cleared out now.
Yes.
I think another difference between the American and the English bells is that the Whitechapel bells have a leather handle, and the clapper mechanism is different, as opposed to the American bells has a plastic handle, which is thicker or wider than the Whitechapel. And having the Whitechapel bells be made out of a leather handle makes them a little bit, I think, more malleable to play. Is that the right word?
Flexible.
More flexible to play?
The Whitechapel bell handles are also narrower than the American bells. The plastic bells, the handles are wider. Another difference, in the American bells, you can adjust the clapper for volume. So this is the softest volume, and you probably don't want to hear the loudest volume, but I'll just let you know. You can twist the clapper to make a louder sound. The Whitechapel bells are not adjustable. The only way you can control volume on the Whitechapel bells is by your ringing technique. You cannot adjust the clappers.
Now, I believe you use a different kind of bell, or you use one of those bells for the bell tree as well.
Yeah, Whitechapel bells are not designed for bell trees. A bell tree is called that because you do something called treeing up the bells by interlocking the handles and forming what's called a tree.
You all can't see that, but Joyce is doing it right now. She's making a bell tree.
You can't see it, but believe me, all right. A tree might be as many as 8 bells. Once you get them all hung up with interlocking the handles, you hang them on an arm of the bell tree stand, and then you take a mallet and ring them that way. So that's bell tree playing. Unfortunately, Whitechapel bell handles are not made so that you can interlock the handle, so you will not be seeing bell trees played with Whitechapel bells.
Interesting. Well, now, Sarah, what about the kiddos, the peanut bells? What type of bells and chimes and so forth there?
Well, so the peanut bells only use chimes. They have not progressed to the Whitechapel set only because chimes are a little bit less expensive to, if something were to happen, it'd be less expensive to replace a chime versus a bell. Peanut ringers are, I think, one of my favorite parts of service sometimes when they play. It doesn't matter if the song is good, or I think most of the time the congregation can figure out what we're playing. But they're just so darn cute, and I think they really enjoy doing it. My youngest peanut ringer was Nicholas Archer. He started at 18 months is when he picked up his first chime. And I
will never forget Nicholas having to jump every time he rang his bell.
Yes, exactly.
That was absolutely that was so cute to watch.
Yeah. And so I start them at 3, kind of whenever they're feeling comfortable. Leon, who has not started playing bells yet, who is Conrad's youngest brother, he comes and sits and is part of the group, kind of. But just to get them comfortable. I don't want to force them to do something that they're not comfortable with. But, yeah, starting at 3, and they pretty much, my group now, I think, is like 8, 9, 10, and 11. And then we've got, little Conrad, I think, who's 5 now.
Yeah,
they're awesome.
They're adorable.
Yeah.
But now let's talk about some more background on bells here. Joyce, I know bell ringing began in England. So why did it begin, and how did it begin?
Well, modern bell ringing began in England. Actually, the Chinese were ringing some kind of bell in BC, but modern bell ringing began in the 1500s when the monks and priests in England rang tower bells in something called peals, when they have maybe 6 tones, and number the tones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they would ring patterns 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They weren't really ringing melodies. These patterns are called peals, and there were strict rules about how to ring a peal. You could never ring the same sequence twice, so every sequence had to be slightly different. This took quite a bit of practice, and people in the neighborhood of the priests and monks ringing the bells in the churches became pretty annoyed at all of the bell clinging, and the monks and priests were becoming pretty tired and cold in these drafty bell towers. So they decided, why don't we go to the pub or to the inn with some smaller bells that represent the tones we're playing and practice with these smaller bells. And that began what was called handbell playing. And then there was a foundry in a part of England called Whitechapel. Part of London district is Whitechapel. The foundry was founded, I believe, in 1572. They began casting bells, particularly for bell playing. Not just for handbell playing. They cast the first Liberty Bell, as a matter of fact.
So the Whitechapel is the original handbell, then?
Whitechapel is the original handbell. And for years, that was the only handbell available. American handbells did not come around until this century. So there was a lady in New England who mastered this art of peal ringing and went to England and successfully rang a very long peal. People in England were so impressed with that they gave her a set of Whitechapel bells to take back to New England. And at that point, she recruited her family and neighbors and friends and said, let's have a bell choir with these bells that I was donated. And thus began bell choirs. And then she even formed a New England bell group called the New England Guild of Handbell Ringing. And then later they decided, let's go national. And so in 1954, the American Guild of English Handbell Ringing was formed, with this lady, Mrs. Shercliffe, being the president. And now we have bell ringing all over the United States. Later they changed this title of the organization to Handbell Musicians of America, so we would incorporate not just ringers, but directors and composers and arrangers. So the group now is called HMA, Handbell Musicians of America, since about 2010, I think. Our director, Dick Litterst, was one of the presidents of this group and also has the title of honorary member.
That's very interesting. Well, let's go back to our bell groups now, and let's move on to our very own Martin ringers. And so, Valerie and Sarah, too, how and when did the Martin ringers begin, and why the name Martin?
Okay. Sarah is the expert here. She has lived this and experienced Martin ringers. I have just been directing for a couple of years. Richard Litterst, was the minister of music and bellmaster at Second Congregational, and when he came to the church in 1959, he was given a set of 18 Whitechapel bells. He had founded bell choirs at other places, and then he began a choir in the fall of that year. The name Martin ringers comes from the Martin family, who tragically lost their daughter, and they gave a sizable memorial to the church asking it be used in some way to benefit the youth. And so the decision was made to purchase more bells, and the group that started, those all high school age boys, became known as the Martin Ringers. So it is the Martin Ringers are named in memoriam of their little girl, and that name has just been continued on. And in about 1967, then a girls' choir was started called the Mini Ringers, right, Sarah? Mm-hmm. And then eventually Martin Ringers became a co-ed group. In 1973, the Thurlestone Bell Orchestra, which is from England, was touring the United States, and with this off-the-table ringing style, which means that the bells are damped on the table as opposed to the shoulders, which is what most handbell choirs do. But it allows for some faster ringing and more complicated scores, I think. We have like duplicates and triplicates, a couple of quadruple sets, and one set where we have 5 of the same bell, quintupled, to allow players to reach bells at different times.
I'd like to add that I started playing bells at Second Congregational Church when I was 10. It was the Whitechapel Bell Group. and I'm only assuming that it's called Whitechapel because of where the foundry was. Whitechapel Bell Foundry in Liverpool, England, is where they were founded. And then once you graduated from the Whitechapel Bell Foundry or Whitechapel Group, then you moved up to the Mini Ringers. And then if you were lucky enough and there was a space available, you could join the Martin Ringers. That was a little bit harder because Martin Ringers didn't want to quit playing. So I actually didn't become a Martin Ringer until I was in high school. Traveled festivals. I never went overseas. My sister did. She went to England, traveled with the Martin Ringers and the Mini Ringers back in the day, but I never made it over across the pond, I should say.
That's pretty amazing, though. The Martin Ringers, I mean, they didn't just travel. There's a recording or several.
We have, I think, 3 albums.
Wow.
And we made a Christmas album, which is pretty cool. I think my mom might have those tapes, those cassette tapes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well,
at least they're not 8-track.
yeah.
Well, and to go back to what Val said about our ringing style. So at age 10, I was taught to ring off the table. And interestingly enough, my uncle, James Lowell Fry, used to be the director of the bell program at our church. And I was told that back in the day, Uncle Evan was at a festival in Kentucky, and the Thurlston Ringers were playing there. And the Thurlston Ringers played off the table, and everybody played off the shoulder. And Uncle Evan was describing this to Lowell, how cool it looked. And, I mean, they really played some pretty complex pieces at that time, or at that festival. And so Uncle Lowell, playing this song Joy, which I think is a 10-page piece, and it's got a lot of changes, Uncle Lowell figured it out, how to ring off the table. And he says that the next year, after he figured out, the other ringers decided to give it a try, and it just caught on. Successive ringing has been taught, this method of ringing, and we've continued that practice. Now, I know Joyce's group, I think, do any of your players play off the table, Joyce, or are you all always off the shoulder?
Whether we ring off the table or off the shoulder kind of depends on what you're ringing. If you're ringing a run like, say, ABC, there's not time to pick up and put down a bell and damp on the shoulder. Mm-hmm. So the carillons actually, for the most part, ring off the shoulder but don't necessarily damp on the shoulder. We say damp any soft place. You can damp on your hip, on your belly, on my head. Damp.
That's a little harder. I don't know.
Any soft place. So we don't always damp on the table, but we might, depending on what's easiest to do.
I probably didn't pay as much attention to it as I should have, but I feel like it wasn't until the Federation and we came to Second Con, and I saw their group ringing off the table, and I feel like that was just kind of mind-blowing to me. And watching them do it, it really looks different because you just pick that bell up and ring it. And it's immediate, and then they can put it back down and grab another bell, and that's why they can play stuff that's faster and more complicated.
That's another advantage of Whitechapel bells. Whitechapel bells are designed so that the clapper rings either direction, either this way or that way. Doesn't matter. Malmark American bells are designed to ring only in one direction. So if you're going to ring off the table, you better make sure you know which direction the
turned around.
The clapper is going, otherwise it's not going to ring. The disadvantage is if you are used to ringing Malmark bells and you come and ring Whitechapel bells, you pick it up and it rings when you just picked it up and you didn't mean to ring it. So there's an adjustment when a ringer tries to change from one bell to the other.
So, Joyce, speaking of the carillons, why that name?
Well, I'm not sure. Maybe Greg knows. I did not start ringing bells until I was retired. And by that time, the carillons at First Press had been going for quite a few years, and they were called at that time the first carillons.
And I remember that. And I remember the change to the name, but I don't know. I don't know why. I never heard why they chose it.
Well, they were already the first carillons before I had ever even touched a bell. Technically, I don't know why they're called that, because carillons are not handbells. Carillons are actually a bunch of bells mounted in a bell tower. They are not rung by hand. They are rung by a keyboard or mechanically. They may have the same sound. Normally there are 20 to 25 bells in a carillon tower. And they do play tunes, so in a way it's like handbell ringing. They play tunes. They're not playing peals. But we are not really carillons. We are actually human beings ringing handbells.
Well, I was going to ask you, both Val and Joyce, the difference between the two groups, but I think you've already answered that question. So I'm going to, but if you want to expand on that a little bit, the difference, and I think you use the same bells, correct?
Martin Ringers have their set and carillons have our set, but they are all Whitechapel bells.
Right.
They are interchangeable, and we actually do borrow from one another, because Martin Ringers, for instance, have some higher bells that carillons do not have. And sometimes if a certain bell isn't ringing correctly, somebody will say, hey, can I borrow your F5? Because our F5 just isn't working correctly. And the two bell groups have a very good relationship with one another, and there's no issue about sharing bells and equipment.
Terrific.
I'd like to add real quick.
Yes.
So the Martin Ringer set, we talked about our bell rack, and our lowest bell is a G2. When Dick Litterist asked the foundry to make us that bell, the foundry did not want to make a bell that big because it was too heavy to ring. And
what does one of those weigh?
About 18 pounds.
The G2, though, bell?
In a Whitechapel.
Let me look this up here, because I wrote that down.
I feel like we talked about it before, and I think the Whitechapel was heavier.
The C2 weighs 21 pounds, and a C2 is only slightly bigger than a G2, so a G2 probably weighs 20 pounds. The Malmarks weigh less, and Malmark actually makes some aluminum bells to ring in the lower tones, so those are even lighter.
Yeah, but once Dick said and told them that we would be hanging this on a rack is when the Whitechapel Bell Foundry said, okay, we'll cast that bell, which I think is kind of cool.
Apparently they'd actually done one before. I mean, we couldn't have been the... No, and our smallest... Well, that's a bigger deal.
Yeah, well, and our smallest bells, the peanut bells, and that's where the peanut ringers actually come from. It's a set that we don't usually have out on the table when we play, because they're starting at, I think, a 0-1, and they go up to a 0-0-1. Yeah. Really tiny. And our tiniest bell is the smallest bell that the Whitechapel Bell Foundry also cast as well.
We do have one of the largest collections of Whitechapel bells in the country because of combining what Second Con had and what First Press had. I don't know if it is the largest, but it is definitely one of the largest collections of Whitechapel bells. Whitechapel bells, by the way, are considered the Cadillac of bells. They are more expensive, and they're considered better quality.
So, Sarah, let's go on to the kiddos here, the peanut bells. How and when did this all begin?
I've been the Peanut Ringer director for 23 years. My son was 4 when I started coming back to church. I took a break after high school. I think most kids do. Anyways, I took a break and came back and wanted my son to start playing bells. And Joe Calkins was the director back then. I don't know how to say this nicely, but I don't think that Joe really wanted to work with the kids. And so Nancy Blake, another prominent family at our church, and all the Blakes played bells too, but Nancy was having the kids play the chimes. And the music board that she had back then was just a big piece of cardboard with colored circles, line after line after line. So if you played 2 songs and you had a circle in front of the kid, this is your note that you're going to be playing. When I point to it, you're going to play. If you had another song that you were going to play and that note changed on the next board, it got very confusing. Lowell, or James Fry, everybody calls him, was the music director of the Bell program at that time, and I had taken over. Nancy had left church, and I had taken over the Peanut Ringers, and I'm like, there's got to be an easier way to come up, to do this if I want to play 2 songs. And so Lowell and I came up with this idea of actually making a music staff, assigning, say, the G5 is green. G5 is always going to be green no matter what song we play. So it'll make it easier when we do switch pieces. And so everything is on a music board now. Val helps me make music. I think Joyce has helped me make music before. And they're kind of learning how to ring or read music, kind of, but a little bit, I'm hoping. But I think it makes it easier for them to play in that style. And then when we have multiple songs, then it's like we can just go to the next piece and not have to worry about changing bells.
Terrific.
Ooh, and I will tell you real quick, though, my youngest bell ringer, now, did I say this earlier, that Nicholas Archer was 18 months? I did say that earlier.
Yeah, I did say that earlier.
Yeah, sorry.
But now you said it again. So I'm going to direct this to all of you. I know that you may be able to go on for hours about this, but why are our bells programs so important to our mission or what we do at Second First Church?
Well, one thing, it provides some musical variety. I think the congregation in general appreciates musical variety, have some instruments, have some voices, have some bells. Another thing that it provides for the bell ringers themselves, it's not just ringing, it's a ministry. They really bond with one another. Bell ringing is different from playing a flute or playing the piano, for instance. No single bell ringer is responsible for the piece. It's a group, it's cooperative learning. So it's a different way of producing music. So I think the purpose of ringing bells, of course, is to enhance the musical service, as is the purpose of any musician providing any music to the church. But it's just a different way of providing music.
Right, Val?
Yeah, handbell ringing has grown in a lot of popularity across the country in the last 20 years, I think, 20, 30 years even maybe. I have a friend who plays in the Chicago Bronze, which is, a traveling group, and she's done it forever. She loves it. She's a trained musician, but the handbell ringing is one of the ways that music making is made accessible to people who don't have musical training and can't read, a whole score, but in the carillons group, they can read their lines of their 4 bells or 4 to 5. How many bells do people play at once in the?
That's a good
in
question.
carillons, for instance, one ringer will be responsible for only 2 tones. For instance, D and E, which would mean, of course, D flat. And so on. So there would be those 4 tones plus the octaves. So the most number of bells that a carillon ringer would ever be responsible for would be 8. Maybe 8 bells, maybe 8 chimes too.
Yeah. And Sarah, you play position 12 in the Martin Ringers, which is on what we'd call the treble table, which they have. How many bells are you responsible for?
I have 20 bells at my space.
Oh, my goodness.
And I have... So I have the 4, A flat, A, C, C sharp, which are the 9 size.
Yeah.
And then I have 2 octaves. So I have 3 octaves at my spot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
but I, of course, don't play all 20 at the same time.
No.
Because you only can play 2 at one time. But there are some pieces where I actually am responsible for 7 bells that are in front of me that I would be playing for that particular piece. Yeah,
that's one of the challenges with sometimes the bell changes are so fast that we have to practice just moving hands around the bell tables. And then the bass tables have the tenor tables, then they all have about 10 bells apiece. And then the bass tables only have got 4 or 5 or 6 apiece.
Player 8 has 8. Player 7, I think, has 8. And then it goes smaller. Player 5, I think, only has 7.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but in the Martin Ringers, the system that Dick Litter set up, it's reading red and green, so people don't have to be able to read music the way that I read music as a trained musician in order to be able to play handbells. So it's a great community thing. The groups. I tease them all the time. I'm like, stop laughing. There's no laughing in rehearsal. This is rehearsal. We have to be serious. But there's a lot of laughter. There's in your group too, Joyce, right?
Oh,
yeah. It's just, and they go to breakfast all the time. I've been thinking Martin Ringers needs to go to breakfast more times too. So it gives the community and the fellowship to the people who are in the group, but then they bring the music, like she said, it's a different timbre and it's a different. Both churches have long-standing traditions of high-quality music programs, First Presbyterian and Second Con, and so this is part of that high-quality music program is having the handbells, and they're different groups that approach it differently, and they minister then to the congregation in just bringing some joyous sounds into the service and joyous music making in service. So it's a circular thing where it's ministering to the people who are in the group being together and having fellowship, and then they're sharing their work with the congregation to enhance the service.
Right.
One thing they said, if you're trying to recruit ringers from the congregation, you say to them, do you know your right hand from your left? Can you count from 1 to 4? You can ring bells.
That was kind of how it was approached when I started playing. Dick Litterist wanted our youth to be involved in ringing bells, and the draw was that you didn't have to read music. If you could read, like Val said, red and green, then you could play bells. And the music is marked, so you know where to play, you know where to damp. And I've kind of learned some musical things from Val, and with doing the Peanut Ringers and marking that music and understanding, that a note is this many counts or this is when it ends or, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But I don't read music, and I love playing bells. I don't know what I would do without playing bells. Oh, I feel like I could cry. But it's very emotional. It is. I mean, we play fun songs. We've played Eleanor Rigby. We've played serious songs. We have a huge bell library of music that we're picking from, and we've got some cool stuff out there.
Great. Anything else you'd like to add? Anybody?
We are on YouTube. The Martin Ringers are on YouTube. If you look up Martin Ringers, there's quite a bit of pieces that I think David Blake posted.
So this is like the old original
original group, yeah.
From the 80s.
From the 80s, yeah. I'm in those videos.
I was just thinking of something that we hadn't talked about. I know maybe the Carolines probably do a little bit more of this. There are other methods of ringing the bell that you have used, and it gives you a different sound where you're not necessarily picking up the bell to ring it.
We do use American bell ringing uses some techniques that English bell ringing does not use. For instance, Martin Ringers normally don't ring chimes; they just ring bells. But Carolines do both bells and chimes. Here are some things that you can do with a chime you can't do with a bell. It's called a vibrato. You can sort of fake that with a bell, but it's just not. Yeah. It's just not the same. Also, we use mallets. This is called a suspended, where you hold the bell up in the air and touch with the mallet, or you can mallet them on the table. Martin Ringers do this too. It's a different sound. And then we use something called a singing bell, and I don't really have the instrument that I would need in order to do this. I don't think I can. But anyway, if you have something that's called a dowel, this mallet is not working, and this bell is too small for that to be working. And you can. This is from ancient times, where they used to do something called the singing bowl, run your finger along the edge of the bowl.
My family used to do that with our water glasses at Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You can take
It's usually
a
my
dowel.
brother that started it.
It needs to be thicker than this mallet, but you can take a dowel and run around the edge of the bell and make a really interesting sound. And there are other techniques that you can do that create different effects.
Yeah, and singing bowls are still used in a lot of places.
Mr. L thought that using mallets was cheating. Mm-hmm. That's why we didn't use mallets.
Right, he didn't like using
Not
mallets.
official.
Yeah,
I think they're great myself.
yeah.
It's just neat to have different, to get the different sounds.
Yeah.
You know, the audience certainly recognizes that you're doing something different. They may not realize right away what it is, but you notice right away that, oh, that's a different sound.
Right.
Well, anything else?
Well, if you remember Car Talk and the Shameless Commerce Division,
I love car talk.
I knew you would. I will make a shameless plug for our Ring in Spring concert, which will be on April 12th at 3 p.m. at Second First Church, and where you will hear all of these bell groups come and play and give a concert.
I will make another plug. A lot of our church ringers are involved in another community group called ECHO. ECHO is an acronym for Ecumenical Community Handbell Organization. I think we have at least 7 ringers from our church that are a member of ECHO. It gives a concert twice a year. Our next one is June 13. We give concerts all over the area, so the June 13 concert will be at Third Presbyterian Church on the west side of Rockford. It'll be that's a Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's just like the concert that Valerie mentioned. It's open to the public, of free admission. There'll be a free will offering.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Valerie and Sarah and Joyce, for your time and your dedication to these programs, because the Bells programs truly are blessings. And thank you for being guests today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for having us.
Second First Conversations is a podcast series from Second Congregational First Presbyterian Church in downtown Rockford, Illinois. Our podcasts seek to educate, inform, and show God's grace. Colossians 4:6 says, "Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned by salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone." This is Phil Davidson along with Greg McCulloch. So long, and thank you for listening.
Second First Conversations is produced and hosted by Phil Davidson, edited by Greg McCulloch. We'd like to thank the Rockford Public Library for use of their excellent recording studio. Our theme music is Vineyard by the Asian Jazz Cafe, and it's courtesy of Universal Studios. To listen to more podcasts or view Sunday services live, visit our YouTube channel, Second First Rockford, or visit us at our website, www.secondfirst.org.